Welcome to Desert Wanderers, produced by Salt and Light Radio. If you're new here, we bridge the gap between you and the person in the pew next to you. I will be interviewing priests, religious, and laity in our local Boise diocese, asking questions that'll help you navigate your vocation and help build community wherever you are with whatever resources you may have. Let's build the city of God together. Well, Marshall, Gabi, it's so nice to have you in this morning. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. If you want to give us a brief introduction, that'd be fantastic.
All right. Go ahead.
Well, I'm Marshall. And this is Gabi, of course. We've lived here for 6 years now in Boise. We met in Montana. We went to Montana State University together. And then we went to the University of Idaho for graduate school, and then moved down here when we got jobs and started our family, and have been practicing NFP since we were married.
Yeah, we got married in between all those, so we were in grad school at the time in Moscow, and that was 8 years ago. And we have 2 girls. We have one that is almost 4 and one that turned 1 kind of recently, and it's been a joy. And I guess I should say I'm from Colombia, so I have an accent, so that's why you hear that. And Marshall's from here, so that's good. That's good for you all.
I love your accent.
Thank you.
Were you guys up there when Father Vogel was up there at all? Did you overlap a lot?
Father Chase.
We got Father Chase the whole time, yeah.
Oh, okay.
I think Father Chase's first year was she was there a semester ahead of me, but
yeah, I think
that was
so
his
too.
first year, so he was very fresh.
Oh, okay.
So I think we missed him literally by 6 months.
Yeah, okay. That makes sense. So how did you guys, what was your NFP journey like?
You may start.
We dated in college, obviously, and then hadn't heard of NFP probably almost every Catholic couple that's dating. I had heard of it mentioned in a Lighthouse Catholic Media CD. Just kind of, it was about human sexuality or something. I don't remember the exact topic, but the speaker mentioned that Saint Teresa of Calcutta was teaching women in India NFP, and they had 99.9% effectiveness. But that was the only kind of
avoiding pregnancy.
Avoiding pregnancy. That was the only kind of reference to it I had ever heard of, and I was like, I don't feel like Lighthouse Catholic Media is just gonna make this stuff up about this effective NFP method kind of thing. So I had that at least in the back of my mind the whole time.
Right.
And we got engaged when our last year in college. And then we were planning the wedding and stuff like that. And we were kind of also moving to Moscow. So we were in a lot of transition, and we found a couple there that taught NFP.
Oh, yeah,
awesome.
I had never heard of it either. And my parents are physicians in Colombia, and they hadn't heard of it either. Catholic, cradle Catholics, all of us. None of us had heard of it. And so my parents were thinking, okay, you're going to plan your family somehow. So they had sent me some documents about different contraceptive methods, because what else could we do if we didn't want, to have many kids in a span that we didn't particularly want? What else could we do? So they had sent me those articles, and so I asked my dad, after Marshall mentioned this research about NFP, is do you have anything on NFP? And he sent me an article that was 2 pages. That was it, like a little brochure. That was it. So not much information at all. And that was from, I think, the American Association of Family Physicians. And so that was a little discouraging. And so I had very little faith in this already going in, because, again, I hadn't heard of it from the medical field, from anybody at home. Again, Catholic, born and raised. So it was a little discouraging. But as Marshall said, as we were going through our marriage prep, it wasn't required in our marriage prep. We went through the Diocese of Helena, I should say, for our marriage. But the couple that was kind of our mentor couple, they did encourage us to go ahead and try to find a couple that taught NFP. And so thankfully, we were in Moscow, as Marshall said, and a couple, Vernon, Linda Geidel, some of you might know them. They're wonderful.
He's the deacon.
He's the deacon at St. Augie's, one of them.
Oh, okay.
And they teach NFP, and they were willing and able and super accommodating for us to go ahead and learn it from them. And they teach a method. It's called Sacred Heart method. It's a symptothermal method, and we learned from them. And from the first class get-go, I was sold. I was like, this is amazing. It's science-based. It's easy to track like the data, and I can see it in my cycles. I have irregular cycles, and so I was like, well, if I can't see that change, then I'm not gonna do it. If I can't see that it's not just the rhythm method, I'm not gonna do this. But I could see all the different biomarkers, and so it was beautiful. And ever since like the second class, basically, once I could see one cycle's worth of data, I was sold. So I felt much better in that respect.
How did you guys get into teaching NFP then?
Well, Gabby's enthusiasm, I think, after having like all the misconceptions kind of shattered with the first class, she was like, just thought every woman should know this about herself, and like
just
even
I hadn't known
before you're
anything.
married and stuff like that, just as a teenager going through that kind of stuff. And I mean, I feel the same way. Obviously, I'm a man, and it's not like my body that we're quite charting as much. I'm fertile all the time. And so it was
just a small flex. Don't worry about it.
It was just something that we thought, obviously we had never heard of it. So we just like, we can complain about people never hearing about it, or the church doing a poor job of promoting it, which I still think it doesn't do a great job, which I'm glad we're working on solving that problem. But we wanted to be part of the solution, not just kind of complain about not having NFP resources and as much visibility.
Right.
I think that was kind of similar to like my husband and I's situation, because NFP changes with your state of life, right? So postpartum is different than pre-pregnancy and menopause and all that. So I remember just getting super frustrated at postpartum, trying to figure out what to do. And if you're in that situation, it kind of can be expensive just looking into different methods, or like deciding what you're going to do and which one's the right one for this period of time. And right. I just remember being super frustrated with that as well. So
yeah, it can get very heavy. Yes. And was one of the reasons we didn't start teaching it until later, was because I wanted to go through postpartum in order to be like, okay, I've done it, I can teach it.
Yeah.
So while we were postponing pregnancy, the first few years of our marriage, I didn't feel comfortable enough teaching it yet.
Yeah.
And so once we had our first daughter, and we went through postpartum and were able to pinpoint ovulation before that next cycle, then I felt comfortable enough. And so we went through looking what methods we could teach.
So what are if you can just break down briefly like the different types of methods and kind of basically how they work?
Yeah.
You know more about the details on this than I do, so
okay,
you can speak to that.
Yeah. So I think they kind of group them into three main groups of the methods. They do like ovulation only methods, or mucus, cervical mucus based only methods. So those would be like Billings and Creighton. And then they have a symptothermal kind of realm. And so that will take into account cervical mucus as well, but temperature, so basal body temperature. Some of them incorporate like cervix. Some of them even add LH strips if you like, as desired. And so that is one of the methods that we teach, is the couple-to-couple league. That's a symptothermal method. And then there are other methods called symptohormonal methods. So those incorporate cervical mucus. All of them have cervical mucus. But the symptohormonal also add basically pee sticks, urine sticks, to check for the different hormones that are circulating in your body at the time when you're testing. Mm-hmm. And so things like Marquette or Boston cross-check, those are a type of symptohormonal methods. And they also, some of them also have the ability to incorporate temperature and LH strips as well, or have them within their requirements as well. So that's neat. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. All I was going to say is, so with couples to couple league, what are you guys teaching then?
So we teach symptothermal. And so symptothermal method for couple to couple league teaches mucus, cervical mucus, how to track that, how to get to know that, and then temperature, basal body temperature, how it goes along with that cervical mucus. So each of these biomarkers that I'm mentioning, cervical mucus, temperature, And then in the case of couple-to-couple league, also cervix, they will be tracking the different hormones in your body. So cervical mucus and cervix will be tracking how much estrogen you have in your body. And then the temperature will be tracking how much progesterone. So depending on what you are measuring of those biomarkers, you'll be able to somewhat pinpoint where in your cycle you're at based on that hormonal output. But again, some of the other methods will give you that as well from the urine sticks as well. So there are many ways in which you can find these hormonal expressions. It's just which one you choose to do, I guess, and what works best. As you said, Natalie, earlier, on each stage of life.
Yeah, and I was going to say there's trade-offs to everything. So
right.
The couple-to-couple method, the symptothermals maybe in general, are they're going to be less costly as time goes on. You don't have to pay for a clear blue monitor or the test strips. You just have basically you're just reading your own body signs, which is free. And then you can chart in an app, or you can do it on paper, which is what we did for the first 3 or 4 years, which very minimal cost that goes along with that. And then we learned a method, as Gabi mentioned. It's really similar to the Billings method, which is symptothermal also. So it was an easy transition to CCL also for us, just because it was similar to what we'd already kind of learned.
Yeah. So then I know that you said at the beginning that you were a little skeptical with NFP. So what did that look like, or how did your parents take it, or what were your guys' initial thoughts when you're starting NFP? When you're actually starting to use it, the methods?
I think my parents were very supportive. They're like, we haven't heard of it either. It might be something to know about. So even though, as I said, they're physicians, they were a little bit scared. But once they saw what it was about, and I showed them, and I showed them my charts and everything, they were like, this is amazing. How have we not heard of this either? So now they're all on board. They tell all the patients that they do have here. Here they're not physicians. They're an endoscopy tech and a medical interpreter. But here they still tell them if they encounter anybody that wants to learn anything like that. They tell them about us and our experience. And so now they're all on board. They wish they had known about it when they were, in their earlier marriage, but that's what it is. And
it's not to say that just because they couldn't find the information for us when they were if you go to these organizations like the American Association of Family Physicians, they're not, it's not the fault of the person looking for the information. It's the organization's just not going to have the information about NFP. There are plenty of studies on NFP, scientific studies. We cover those broadly in the class. So you can see what the methods of those studies were doing, the effectiveness and all the data on that. And the data exists. It's just, it's not a very prominent thing for medical organizations to promote and have readily available. Yeah, we've encountered a few, if not several, people who are going through the medical process now or have recently gone through it, and they say once we went and learned about fertility of women, the first thing they say is, if there's an issue, just prescribe birth control, or if there's a concern, prescribe birth control. And that's about it. They don't go through really their cycle, aside from telling them these are kind of the main hormonal outputs, and they all say, you're going to have ovulation on day 14, because I guess it doesn't matter how long your cycle might be. So it's kind of silly. They don't go into that the most known idea of NFP is the rhythm method, which is not, and the people that might not support it are the ones that think it's the rhythm method, and it's and yet it's far more scientific teach, than they're promoting the perpetuating the misconception themselves.
Yeah, I think that every time so after we had our first son, they were like, what are you guys planning on? How are you planning on spacing your children? You can get pregnant at 6 weeks, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, yeah, we're going to use NFP. And they're like, well, that's not very effective. And you're like, well, but it is. I mean, maybe not in my case, because we got pregnant at 5 weeks or 5 months postpartum. But I mean, at the same time, it is, if you know what you're doing. Previously, my husband and I weren't trained, so we do the Marquette method. And we were kind of doing it ourselves, but I was also kind of frustrated because there isn't a teacher here in Boise, so there wasn't anyone in person that I could get to, and it is rather expensive. like to start up, and it has a higher cost like to continue it through. But anyways, so I just remember getting super frustrated, and then like they're like, oh, well, why don't you just do birth control? And you're like, no, like I want to do NFP. And then that kind of like dove into a hole. Like I dug into a hole of just like, well, why is insurance only covering
right?
Why is insurance only covering this when they can just cover like a monitor, or they can just cover like the like urine sticks or a thermometer or all the things that we need to do this method and be effective. And it got into like the whole thing about what different types of birth control cause what type of cancers and like what kind of side effects. And you just like get into this, and it's just like this huge hole where you're like, oh my gosh, everyone needs to know about this. Like, oh my goodness. Yeah. So how are you guys currently taking on clients?
Well,
if you email us, we'll happily teach you.
Email or
if we
phone
can make
call or
time
anything.
For it.
Yes.
Primarily, kind of we advertise. We work with the St. Mark's Marriage Prep program. So they have kind of 2 sessions, sometimes 3 each year, but spring and fall. They have like their engaged couples going through in the spring and also in the fall. And then we have like they have like a booklet they work through, and NFP is one section. So we do that section, and then we try to plan our class conveniently after that, so that a couple that was interested in it, they could sign up for the class. That's kind of part of they're going through the marriage prep. So now it's just one more class they can add before their wedding, hopefully, in the spring and the fall. So we generally try to offer 2.
Right. I mean, we target it towards St. Mark's people, as Marshall said. But once we have a class lined up, we send it to pretty much every church in the valley, and hopefully they have it in their bulletins. Most of them do respond and add it. And so we've had a few students that contact us from different churches.
The diocese does a good job of.
Yeah, the diocese does a really good job also in advertising it. But that's what we do. For the method that we're teaching, as you said, Natalie, it is frustrating in certain cases, and women go through a lot of stages in their life, and so because of that, we also decided to learn a different method to teach it. And so currently we are on the learning point of it, and so this method that we're learning is called Boston Crosscheck, and it is very similar to Marquette. But in order to teach it, we have to learn it. And so because I'm in a postpartum phase right now, we have a little one, and I'm still not cycling, I'm also in the learning phase of it. And so I'm going through all the clear blue monitor and the urine sticks and everything. And it does get expensive.
Yeah, it does.
But it's, hopefully in the long run, once I go through it, and I'll be able to teach it maybe in a year or 2 as well for women who want that face-to-face interaction and like an easier to reach basis rather than communicating with someone from, I don't know, Nebraska or Minnesota or something. Yeah. So that's the idea.
So for myself, I do the Marquette, but I never really understood the difference between the Marquette method and the Boston Crosscheck method. And then I guess to like preface, I started with the clear blue monitor, and I actually didn't like it because it's just high or low, high, peak. Right. And if you're in postpartum, it'll be like low, 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 high. And once it hits a high, then that monitor only stays high until you reset it because it's waiting for peak, because it's not meant to that. It wasn't created to abstain, right? So then I would get super frustrated because if you reset the monitor and then test it again, it would be low again because you're postpartum, your like estrogen is up and down. So I switched over to the Marquette, or to the Mira. To the Mira monitor, which just gives you accurate pinpoints every day, and you can test multiple times a day. But so what's the difference between the Marquette versus like the Boston Crosscheck? Do you have a pulse on that?
I've never been trained in Marquette, so I don't know the specifics of it. From what I gather, Boston Crosscheck, you can incorporate as many, and that's why it's called Crosscheck. You can incorporate as many of these biomarkers as you want. So you can take cervical mucus, temperature, the clear blue monitor. I don't know if they have Mira monitor options. I would assume they do, but I don't know for sure. And LH strips as well. Go ahead.
Yeah, no. So they were saying with the Mira that it was still in testing, but they had enough data that they thought that they could accurately give it, but they just give like a disclaimer, like this is still pretty new, that we're testing off this. So that's might be why they don't have one for the Marriott, because that was just with and I don't know if all of the Marquette teachers have all the same data.
Right.
I know that you have to be trained by Marquette University to be, and you have to be an RN to do it, because I think it crosses over into like hormonal, like health. I don't know. Right. They have a whole other side of that on there too. True. So, but yeah, so that's interesting. Okay. So you just use multiple methods. Mm-hmm. I wonder if that for you, does that feel like comfortable, because you've already done like the symptothermal, you've already done like the Billings. It was Billings, right?
It was so the symptothermal method that we used the Billings method as a cervical mucus check. Mm-hmm. But then it also incorporated temperature kind of on the side. So,
okay.
So we've done a few, I guess. Yeah. But no, it's interesting. It certainly feels like a lot sometimes, because there was a lot of the time in our marriage before we had our first daughter, like 2 years, I think, that we charted, but it was very minimal, because I knew my body so well. My temperatures weren't that great of a predictor, so I basically just used cervical mucus. That I basically didn't do much charting at all, because it was so easy at that point. So now it feels like I do so many things. I do the pee sticks. I'm also doing like a little self experiment of different thermometers. So I have like 4 thermometers, and I do like cervix checks and cervical mucus. It feels like there's a lot, but it also, because I am trying to do comparisons and have the data that I can, which is on my own, it also feels kind of fun, like an experiment. I'm sure Marsha doesn't feel the same.
I just wake up and she's got like her armband with the temp drop, and she's got the ear one and the mouth one all at the same time, and she's like trying to get these temperatures recorded before the young one wakes up.
Okay, so with that though, so the temp drop you wear all night, right? Uh-huh. And then the ear, what's the ear one?
It's just an eardrum thermometer. My dad.
Do you wear it at night or no?
It's like the big like gun shaped one that you use.
Oh, okay.
Right. I just want to see what like the differences are in recording and how that goes throughout, the day.
Because when she was learning with the basal body temperature on the tongue, it was really hard to catch her.
Yeah, my temperatures were just so different, and I never bothered doing anything about it until now that I'm like, maybe I should check if it's me or if it is the thermometer. So now I'm doing all of them to have a, data. So
what have you found with the...
I haven't been able to find, because I'm still postpartum.
So oh, okay. Yeah. That's so interesting though, because even with like for children, when we got one of these like forehead, just the point and shoot ones. Yep. We got one of those thermometers for my son, and I remember like first baby, this total first baby thing. He was always a warm baby. He always was like he just ran warm. And so I would be like freaking out, because my monitor would be like on the side, it says red, like he's too hot, but on the forehead, he's like green. And on the other side, he's green. And I'm like, oh my gosh, which really is just him like laying on his one side of his head. So we ended up getting like the like swipe ones. Oh, okay. And I really liked that one. I think it's more, you can do both sides or whatever, but it like traces this nerve. Anyways, so thermometers in general are just kind of interesting to like see which ones are more accurate or which one gives you like more consistent data, because I also think like the one that's just like the point and shoot ones, I feel like I would get a different thing. I could like click it 3 times and it would give me a different number every time. So that's also kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's challenging. I mean, and thank goodness the femtech nowadays is getting better, and so I think all the different devices that we use to track our different biomarkers are getting better and better and better,
and more convenient.
And more convenient as well.
The temp drop and the Aura ring. What's the other one?
There's like a bracelet. I can't remember what it's called. Like a
but
wrist bracelet.
You don't have to wake up at a certain time and take your temperature. So like for new moms, that's really convenient, because then you just get your reliable temperature over the night, and then if you wake up at 5 or 7, depending on when your child wakes up, you can get a good reading on it still, instead of the basal body temperature. You have to wake up at the same time. Kind of, it assumes you wake up at the same time every day and take that temperature. So
yeah, that's I think one of the other reasons why I liked the Marquette, because you could just like whenever you go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, that's like good enough as long as you don't go over 4 hours. So you could just like keep it and save until you're ready to test. But that was one of the things prior to getting married. I did the symptothermal just for like a small period of time, and I was like, I am just not I'm not awake enough in the morning to remember to take my temperature.
Right. So, yeah, there's a lot to say about all these methods require some discipline. All of them, or rather, some of them require more so than others, but all of them require some discipline and a learning curve. So, but I mean, so does, if you're going to plan your family through a contraceptive method, it also requires some discipline. Like if you're going to have hormonal birth control, you're going to take the pill, you got to take the pill at the same time every day. So it also requires some discipline in that respect. So you're not going to get off if you want to plan your family with nothing.
Right.
But there is a learning curve and some, time that you got to put into things and specificity, scheduling. So that is also true.
Okay, so I think the other thing that I was always told was, I think the church does a really great job of like promoting it in a very beautiful light, which is good, right? Because it is beautiful, right. But it's very hard. And I don't think enough people talk about how hard it is. And maybe this is just me, but I feel like it's hard for us as a couple sometimes, because sometimes you just like, I think that it can cause a lot of tension, especially if the communication, that's one thing I learned, is that Aaron and my communication has to be really good, or else like, we'll get frustrated. So sure. I guess, how do you talk to couples about just that it's hard?
I would say marriage is also hard. And that I would say all the challenges that come along with NFP are just probably magnified from maybe the challenges that you're having with your marriage. And in our class, like a little saying from the CCL is that if you can talk about NFP, you can talk about anything. So it kind of forces the communication, because you have this continuous discussion about family planning, which encompasses almost every aspect of marriage, like finances, emotional well-being, spiritual well-being, physical well-being, all that kind of stuff comes into it. And
you got to do it at least once every cycle at the very least. So that has to be, revisited over and over and over. So encourages that communication. Exactly. And so we tell them that. We tell them you're going to have to, communicate a lot, not just on your fertility, but as Marshall said, all the aspects that go hand in hand with that. And we tend to tell them that there are times where you have to abstain, and it's not easy, but you can try to find other things to do. So if you have if you've done what is it called? The love languages quiz. Mm-hmm. So, for example, if physical touch was your top high love language when you can't have it, then resort to that second love language that you like the most. So if that is quality time, then try to spend more time together doing some other thing. If it is acts of service, make sure that time you are doing more things towards your spouse. Because you got to feel loved some way or another. And it might be hard during that time through that physical medium that God gave us. So we tell them it's hard, but there is beauty in doing it. And there's also a lot of beauty in the time that you come together afterwards, because it feels like a little honeymoon, as people say, that, you have abstained for that time, and then finally you get to have that moment together, and it is beautiful. And although some people might feel like it is planned and it's kind of takes the spontaneity away, I think you can plan it to be fun, and not just like, oh, do you feel like having fun? But rather like, oh, let's make this special. Yeah. And so it can go both ways. So
do you guys give any advice or maybe some strategy to have to help your couples through that, or how do you guys kind of approach that?
Every couple is going to be different, I think, with how they're going to handle that, but find something that can bond together as a couple.
We give them examples of what we do.
Yeah,
as much as
this was before kids, but we had card games that we like to play a lot, or maybe a Netflix series that we would watch, or we were pretty active. We like going to the gym, doing hiking, stuff like that. But obviously you can't go do outdoor activities just during the week or something, but find some lower key stuff that you like together as a couple. That's kind of special that only you guys do together, that maybe only you can do together, just because of the time constraints or whatever.
Yeah, but as Marshall said, every couple is different, so we can only give what we do, and hopefully that's a good guideline, but it really will come down to what works for you guys. Mm-hmm. So we tell them that, but I don't know. I haven't heard from the students that we've had how they've managed with that. But
We'll have to add some follow-ups for a few years later and see what
Right,
we
yeah.
come up with.
that is true.
Do you guys feel like you have become mentors to some of the couples that go through your classes? Because it really can meld into like just marriage advice kind of. Right. And I know that they usually do NFP like breakdowns in the marriage encounter weekend, or if you choose to do the 6-week training with a couple, they usually have like a whole week that they talk to you about NFP. So do you ever feel like there's like a line there that you guys have to be guarding, or does it kind of, melt into, some more like, oh, have you thought about like trying to communicate better about this, or maybe you guys need to address certain things? Have you guys felt like you have come into more of a mentor role?
Well, we are the lead mentor couple for the St. Mark's Marriage Prep program. So we kind of have that role, although we have how it works is the couples rotate with, we have a set of mentor couples, and then the engaged couples go to each other house like once every 2 weeks, and they have a different kind of topic of discussion.
So we're already with those couples that do take our class from the marriage prep at St. Mark's. We already kind of have that role, but of kind of getting into their business a little bit.
It's interesting though, because there's couples that are having like their marriages validated that have been married longer than us. So well, we can tell you all this great advice, but you guys also, we could probably learn from you also, because I think we've had more than one couple that's been married like 5+ years come through there that's been just having their marriage validated. So it's always interesting. I'm very cautious about giving other couples, marital advice, especially that have been married longer than us and are going through a great step of validating their marriage in the church like that. So, but I think maybe to the actually engaged couples, they have a pipeline of contact to us if they want to further that mentorship, I guess. Right.
And I think some of the couples that we have taught either through the marriage prep course at St. Mark's or the actual NFP class, the couple-to-couple lead class, we have become pretty good friends of them and see them. And now we've seen some of them like at church, and some of them have families already, and it's been nice to see how they grow and how our conversations have shaped into their family. So that is sweet. That is very sweet to see. But it becomes more of a friendship rather than you like follow this rule kind of thing, which I think is very sweet. And I hope that as we continue to teach, it continues to be that way, that we see more and more families and feel like we've made our little part in it.
Yeah. I think there is a general awareness in the world today that women's health is not being addressed as much as it needs to be. So have you seen anyone that has been interested that isn't Catholic come through your classes, or do you have any Protestants or any of our, Christian brothers and sisters that have been wanting to come in and take these classes?
I've tried to make awareness of our classes through like the clinics. So for example, I try to get Stanton does promote our clinic to the women that go through there, and I've tried some of the other pregnancy resource centers. And then, for example, Sarah Howard at the Boise Rescue Mission, she also tries to promote it over there. And so there is, I'm trying to bring awareness that is there for women who want to do it. We recently encountered a person just randomly at Lucky Peak who seemed interested. And so we sent her a lot of materials, and she was like, great, I'm going to tell my friends. I'm going to look into it and I'll let you know. But it's not like people are reaching us directly like that yet, at least. I hope that
be great if
that's going to be the case, but not yet. And in talking about that, I'm also learning a different method that is called Fem Health.
Yeah.
It's FEMM Health. And that is targeted, I think, more towards that type of mindset, a slightly younger woman who are just tracking for health reasons, not necessarily to plan their family, although you can use it for that. For women like that, so not necessarily in the Catholic setting, although I would love every Catholic to do it. I also want other people to know about it.
Yeah.
And so I'm also learning that method starting in the fall. So I can teach people like that feel perhaps a little bit, what would it be the question? Like barrier limited.
Yeah. Just
by it's a couple-to-couple league method and it's Catholic.
Yeah.
Just so that they can actually approach me a little bit better, perhaps.
I agree with that. So again, when I was going through my NFP drama, I guess, just like really concerned about it not being talked about enough, even in Catholic circles. One of the things I had thought about was just like other women and how we should just know what our bodies are doing. It's like, I think also going through postpartum or like pregnancy and birth and postpartum, I think I just realized there's so much that we are not taught about our bodies, you know,
right,
and how they're supposed to work. And
right.
I think there's also like a lot of medical intervention, maybe when there should be, maybe when there shouldn't be, you know, so there's just a lack of information on those things. And so I have seen though an uptick in Catholics listening to, there's a couple of podcasts that do NFP, basically is what it is, but they don't call it that. I think they just call it the fertility awareness method or something like that.
Right.
And so I think there is an uptick of women that are just like, yeah, birth control is really bad, you know, and there's different ways to do that. But when you go into the femme part, are you thinking that there's going to be any conflicting, I guess, information? I don't know, because I think other people use like barrier methods of contraception during those like moments, more secular like versions of MFP. So do you think you're going to have to address that in any way, or what are your thoughts on that?
From what I have read and gathered, I think it's up to you as an instructor what you teach.
Oh, okay.
So you tell them, you know, you're fertile here, and you choose what to do, and you can put your own grain of sand. So that might be a way to evangelize, you know, like, you know, you can choose to use a barrier method during this fertile time if you are sexually active, or you can choose to abstain and look at the beauty in a different way. So I think as an instructor, you have the ability to do what you want in that respect. Just tell them when they're fertile, when they're infertile, or not tell them, but tell them the things they have to track in order to know. And they choose to do what they will. But again, you can put your grain of sand and do a little evangelization. That's another way to try to get to people to find the faith, I think.
Mm-hmm.
When we were training to be certified instructors, they had us read this pamphlet from, I don't remember the name of the bishop that wrote.
Hogan, I think.
That sounds right. It's titled, Why is NFP Good? And basically he just makes a good case for it's an act of virtue, learning the language of your body through like theology of the body. So even if you had a couple that was, or a woman not married that was tracking her fertility through whatever fertility awareness method, it's an act of virtue in itself. So she's leading herself to virtue, even though if she's sexually active outside of marriage and not using it maybe for the best ends, but she's still more virtuous before now than she was before, even if it's still leading her in the right direction. And like Gabby said, it can be a source of evangelization in that respect.
So then how do you talk to husbands? Because I think wives are pretty on board when it comes to NFP. They're like, great, I get to learn all this information. So how do you talk to husbands and work with the husbands? Well,
so yeah, that's the great thing about the couple-to-couple league is it's specifically for couples, so engaged or married. I don't think they would exclude a boyfriend or girlfriend. I don't know if they do. We haven't had to come across that yet.
Because I have asked that because of the whole giving it to pregnancy research centers, and they said that it's not encouraged, but we wouldn't turn them away by any means.
Yeah, so it like everything set up with like the registration for the class, it's kind of assumed there's the man and the woman's information, and that there's two people coming. So we actually have every couple I think we've had, the man is super on board when he's there. So it might be a self-selecting thing where if the man's not on board and only the woman the woman wouldn't reach out by herself kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So maybe with Gabi's learning of that, the fertility,
we'll encounter
the femme methods, maybe they'll get more women, and then we can kind of help lead the men, the husbands, the other side of that equation, towards being on board with that. But so far we haven't really
encountered
had a lot of
I
challenges with that, which is a good thing, I think.
For sure. I think having Marshall as an example really helps, because again, he was the one in our couple that was kind of pushing us towards NFP, and he's so good at communicating the science of it, but also the challenges of it, that I think men feel a little bit validated when they hear his experience, I think. Not to say that he's the only guy that does it, but it helps to see that on a personal basis.
What are some of the challenges? I feel like even if you're Catholic, and again, when Aaron and I got married, it was like, oh yeah, NFP is this really beautiful thing, and it's so easy, and we are so excited to do it, and both of us were on board, and then, you know, we got pregnant really fast, and then postpartum came, and it was like literally just smacking into a brick wall. And granted, I just want to preface this, I love our daughter. She is amazing. She's so beautiful. I wouldn't be so sad had I like missed this, but like, you know, because I feel like every single video I see is just like, it's so beautiful, it's so good, you're like going towards virtue, and you're like, I don't think people realize, or I didn't realize, like what virtue really calls you to. So I guess like how do you talk to couples about that?
Yeah, I think obviously it's tracking a lot of the woman's biomarkers, so the man is kind of a backseat in that, but at least with the charting, it seems like in the class a lot of the men are kind of, maybe they're just men are a little more analytic in general. They like the charts, and they seem like they're, once you see that temperature graph and you see like the fertility, the mucus fertility, less to more to less again, they get on board with the interpreting, which is fun. They like to do the interpreting more, it seems, and which is a great way to support your wife. And like, you can't take her temperature for her. You can't do any, like, if you're doing another method with like the hormones, you obviously can't help with that, but you can. I'm sure most wives would probably agree that they're happy to do that on their own, and just having the moral support of their husband is really all they need. And if you're at least like looking at the chart or expressing interest in the chart, that is probably, I would say most women are probably just elated to have that kind of support more than anything.
Yeah, that's very true. We do tell, or I do tell couples that, because we had that few years before we got pregnant with our first, I do tell them that I would encourage them to have a little time before they try to conceive after they have learned the method, so they can get used to what their normal cyclicity is like. But I mean, it's up to you, of course. It's you and your marriage and your responsible parenthood. But I do encourage them to go through the method a few cycles on their own, like without achieving pregnancy, for the purpose of getting to know their body better, and getting to know what you're going to do in those moments of abstaining, that they're going to be a lot more prolonged during postpartum cycles. And
there's a lot more variables of you have a child now that you don't get to, it's not just you and your spouse, so that the child is another curveball of limiting your activities or quality time you can spend together that you used to but you don't get to anymore. Right.
Do you have to have any conversations with couples in terms of like openness to life, I guess? Because I think that's another thing that's okay. So in the church, you know, they teach there's reasons why you can abstain. So then do you go over that in your course, or like to break it down into moral, like?
Yeah, we have a section on responsible parenthood and like the theology of the body behind that.
Right.
And
thank goodness we're not the main talkers in that. We have a priest who it's a video recorded and we like go through what he says, but he's the one providing the morality of it.
It's far from a theology of the body course, but it provides like the basics and the reasons, and it handles the misconceptions about like Catholics are not called to have as many children as biologically possible. It's the practice of responsible parenthood, of postponing pregnancy or deciding to indefinitely postpone pregnancy for whatever material, indefinite, physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological, all those aspects. And the CCL course is set up to kind of address that really specifically, but that happens probably more in a diocese that requires an NFP course as part of the marriage prep. You probably get couples that don't plan to use NFP, they don't want to use NFP, but they want to get married in the church. And so they're required to take this course, and that's why it's provided. In Boise, the Diocese of Boise, we're not required to have an NFP course as part of the marriage prep. So it's kind of self-selecting. You get the couples that aren't going to use the contraception already, and they're already on board. So we don't have that issue. I'm sure if you spoke to a couple in Diocese of Denver, I think is one that they require it. So they, as part of our training, we called into an online training. And there was maybe like 20 or 30 couples.
Which is
part of the great.
Completely unseen from our perspective.
Yeah.
I imagine the majority of them are not really NFP on board, like they're planning to use contraception.
Oh.
So that's why the Couple to Couple League course has all this information about the moral aspect and why the Catholic teaching is that we should not use contraception, and it handles a lot of the misconceptions. But again, in our experience, almost everybody's on board with it already, and
Right.
Just kind of affirming, maybe fleshing out like the reasons a little better than maybe somebody could have, but they're already on board with it. So.
Right. And they've never expressed like, this is great. I really like it because we're now finally never going to have children like we meant to. Like it's never been that kind of conversation.
Well, although I guess we do have that maybe more in our marriage prep. Because
Yes.
we get, not to say the couples don't take an NFP class. That's not with us. We won't ever assume that. But that's more likely where we would encounter a couple that's not planning to use NFP or use contraception. And that's where we kind of dive into the
morality of it.
morality. We focus more on just our personal experience because people are just subjective more than they don't. That's just how people are nowadays. Is subjective, and hearing a personal experience of having our misconceptions shattered and going through a good experience with NFP might be more useful than just trying to show them the philosophy of why NFP is accepted and why contraception is not and all that kind of stuff.
Right. I also send at least all the couples that go through the Couple to Couple League method course with us. I send them the article that Marshall mentioned, the one from Reverend Hogan, of why is NFP good. It's not very long, but it also kind of gives them a basis. Okay, why should I practice it? It's not just for the purpose of not having children when I don't want them. There's more to it. And so if they read it, great. If not, then at least I made my job of peace of mind sending it to them. Hopefully one day they would. So we try, but who knows?
So then do you continue with do you do follow-ups with your client, or not clients, but your the people that go through your course? Do you do follow-ups with them for a certain period of time, or can they reach out to you afterward? And I guess the reason I'm asking that to preface is, there's some couples that struggle to conceive, and then you have hyper fertile couples, and there's everything in between. So how do you guys work with those couples afterward, if you do? Sorry.
We do. Yeah, we tell them they can reach us anytime they want, anytime, literally. And so the first couple that we taught, we see them pretty frequently at just different events, and we don't talk specifically about that, but they're always talking about life, and so they're free to ask us anything. And I touch base with all the other people that we have taught every now and then. How's it going? Do you need any help with the recharting? Is everything flowing well?
As part of the course, though, we're required to reach out. I think we're
required to 6 months after
they complete the course. So
they complete the course at the very least.
The course takes 3 months. It's another 6 months, so it's like 9 months of in contact with
at the very
whoever's
least,
taking
yeah.
the course, yeah.
And then if you want to continue,
afterwards, if they want
by
to,
all means, yeah.
I anticipate if we taught a couple that was engaged and then they were postponing pregnancy, whatever, and then they achieved pregnancy, they would probably reach out to us for postpartum resources at some point, I would imagine. But
yeah.
CCL's got a lot of online stuff, so they can probably just also.
Yeah, a lot of people also have, not a lot, but a few people that have shown interest. I have sent them like the registration link to our class, and then they realize that they can take it online, which honestly, it works for a lot of people better because of schedules and children and whatnot. And they're like, actually, I'm going to go with this. And I'm like, great. As long as you're taking a class, I am happy.
And you still have a mentor. Or
you still have sometimes you have like a mentor couple if you do it on your own through it's called self-paced class. You still have to choose a mentor couple. So sometimes they have chosen us as a mentor couple, even though they're doing kind of the class on their own. They still have to check in with you every now and then for charting. So, but yeah, we continue to follow through with them for however long they want. And if I have sent 2 or 3 messages over the span of 3 months and I haven't heard back, then I lay back.
Like, you got it.
Yeah.
Don't worry, you got it. You're doing great.
Right.
But again, like, how do you deal with couples that, like, I guess, do you deal with couples that have hyperfertility or that are struggling with fertility?
We haven't yet on either.
We've had one couple reach out to us that was trying to achieve pregnancy.
Yeah, they were in Catholic,
but it
actually.
wasn't.
Oh, sorry. That was one of the couples that reached to us that wasn't Catholic. I think their parents were, and so that's how they had heard of us. And so we didn't actually go through the whole CCL course with them, but
Just
the major things that
discussions,
they should, kind of be aware of. But that's, I think, the only ones that we have had to deal with that we're struggling with either.
Haven't had any hyperfertile.
No, haven't had any hyperfertile couples.
I don't know if we would maybe. I don't know if we would. I feel like if they're practicing the method effectively, that
might not
might
be.
not be an issue. Like it might not come up. So I don't know.
Who knows? I'm not sure.
There's this one website that does Marquette, and they have a slide that breaks down all of the NFP methods and then all of the contraceptive methods, and they compare them all. And it's so cool because when you look at it, even with typical use, you're either at the same or above like contraception.
Yeah, the marriage prep book that St. Mark's uses is called Teaching with Love. That one has a similar slide. I think it is very good for those couples that are kind of on the fence that you see going through and they're like, oh, all right, we should do something about this. But it is nice to see that comparison of, okay, even if I am using this not perfectly, I'm still probably going to be better off than if I were using contraceptive, if I'm trying to avoid pregnancy in a typical use way.
Do you ever struggle with people that say, well, my physician, they don't think this is a good method or anything like that? Do you even like have conversations with physicians about NFP? Because I just think it's changed so much even in the last like 10 years, right? That unless you're a medical professional who's Catholic and has like a legit reason to be interested in it,
right?
I don't think that information is really being circulated from my experience. It's all anecdotal, but
yeah, it is challenging.
We don't have any direct experience with like talking.
No, our OBGYN is Catholic, and so he takes it in like, great, you do your thing, you're good. And we've given him some of our cards, so he gives it to clients. I haven't heard from any of them, but I also reached out to St. Al, see if they would take some for that purpose, so that doctors can maybe reach out to me, if not the patients. One of our students said that she went to her doctor and she told them that she was practicing NFP, and the doctor's like, that's not going to work. And so she told them about all the science, and she felt really, really cool. So that was nice to hear. And then we've had a few other people who have gone through the course or have reached out that are currently in the medical field, and what I have heard from like Doctor to Doctor podcast and other podcasts is that when you are learning, it's too hard to go ahead and try to teach it to your teachers. So just kind of take in what they say, but then once you're a physician or a nurse or whatever it is you're training to be, then you can try to make a difference. And so I tell them that in the hopes that once they reach their degree, they become better and more knowledgeable and spread the word. But once they're students, it's challenging. So just kind of don't take it for granted what they're telling you. But yeah, trying to make those connections better with physicians, because many of them just don't know, because again, the training, they don't go through it. And so we're trying slowly but surely to make those connections with them, so they might become more interested. And in Idaho, there's just not many providers of like natural procreative technologies or some of the other mediums, and so it's also challenging because there's just not available. So, but getting there. So,
were you talking about NAPRO technology?
Right. Yeah. So NAPRO technologies is it uses the Creighton method, but there are providers not necessarily that are called NAPRO providers, but are also fertility care physicians that use natural mediums. So they can use, for example, a different method to track your cycle. So, for example, they use Marquette, but they are just as knowledgeable as a NAPRO provider, because again, NAPRO providers are specifically using Creighton method to help you with the charting. Or they might be trained in both, in the natural procreative technologies that are done through the Creighton method, as well as other technologies, so they could use a different methodology to check your chart your cycles. So for example, there's a couple, their business, I think is called Vitae CME, that does that teaches medical providers that might be knowledgeable in other methods, all these different procreative technologies that are natural, that are healthy and, none full of different hormonal aspects. So getting there.
Awesome. So then how can people find you? Do you guys have an email, or how do most people reach out to you?
Email or phone number we have in the bulletin at St. Mark's, where the NFP contact. Elsewhere we have tried, but no. So just whenever we have a class going on, they advertise it, but we're not a contact in the other parishes. But if you hear from us, you will know that we're there. People are starting to kind of get the word of mouth that we're around. But yeah, phone number or email is the best way.
St. Mark's Bulletin has.
Again, St. Mark's, Bulletin has our information. And do you want us to give it?
Absolutely.
So our email is M as in Marshall, and then G as in Gabi, and then Boyland. So MG Boyland, BOYLAND, at ccli.org. And then my phone number is the one that they usually reach is for. That's okay.
You can put that in like the description or something like that.
Yeah. Sure. We can put it in the notes.
Yeah.
Those are.
Yeah. Great. Well,
we'll get you some business cards.
Yeah. Just hand them out to everybody. Well, awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys coming in.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for having us. It was really nice.
Yeah. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Desert Wanderers. If you liked it, give us a thumbs up as well as subscribe down below. We're produced by Salt and Light Radio, so you can find us on social platforms at Salt and Light Radio or Desert Wanderers Podcast. We produce episodes every week and we launch them for you on Wednesdays. So make sure to tune in for next week's episode, and we'll see you then.